two ways that I've seen people, well, there's generally been one way I've seen people grapevine the legs, and they try to straighten that leg way out, they stiffen it. I think it's minimally effective. I think there's a better way, being the way that we were just looking at doing this. Now we're going to look at countering this, obviously, together with dropping the elbow. Some of you guys were doing it, but you were dropping, you were a little too high. Now imagine when I straighten my elbow out in the mounted position, this is all pre-climb and pre-elbow work. We haven't even gotten to focus on the elbow yet. The reason I say that is because 9 times out of 10, the minute you're in for the biggest fight to maintain the mount the minute you get there, right? Because they know they only have a few seconds worth of time to get you off before either points are getting credited or they're fixed in. They understand the importance of it just as much as you do, that if you're allowed to settle, that's where they get into really big trouble. Okay, so you're going to be in for the most fight the first few seconds that you get into the mount. That's where you really need to focus on stabilizing. We want to do the high elbow, but we don't want to outrun ourselves. We need to stabilize the mount position. Okay, so these little tricks are kind of the way I stabilize. We're fixing to go into crossing the legs. Something I want to make sure that you guys understand is on the wrap, if he wraps the arm, as soon as he wraps the arm, some of you guys are you're turning your elbow to the ceiling. That's good. But the problem here is if you're giving him all this space, he can still pull down and kill that. Okay? So what I want to do is as I rotate my elbow, I want to imagine that I'm going to try to put my forearm to the mat, bicep to the mat, shoulder to the mat, forehead to the mat. Because that pretty much guarantees me that he doesn't have any space to work with right here to get my arm tucked inside. And it gives me an additional post. It pretty much guarantees that my elbow is up, so he's not going to take me this way. Okay? Head is down on this side, so he's not taking me this way. I'm splayed too far out. Then when we start to add this movement here, the scorpion kick, and this is nothing more than I'm trying to do that on either side to negate the hip drive. It's unbelievably effective because the second that I go high and I drive my hip, it negates 90% of that hip drive and it glues my hips to his belly. So whichever way he tries to take me, I'm gonna just snap that leg in there and I'm gonna glue myself to him, and then by the time you add, if he's locked here and I'm coming off to the side, he goes nowhere. Okay, he's stuck. Then I can recover and I can come right back up and I can pick my moment. The second the foot drops, I can start to climb up. I can start to work on my elbow the minute that I've stabilized. Okay? The other way of doing this, I've seen guys, they try to grapevine this leg way out. That's what happens. Okay? They just separate, go back over the top of it. When you take your shin to the apex of the knee there, hard for him to move it and dislodge it. He's got to make a choice. If he wants to lift his hips up, what's he got to do to his feet? You have to be on the ground, and that creates that triangle for me to go up at the top of it and lock. Okay? Another thing that I do, we're going to work on this right here. I might do it with both legs. Okay? Putting my heels together so that the second that I feel him raise his hips up, I climb, I drop, and I go farther up underneath his butt. So now he can't drop his butt all the way back to the mat. And this is unbelievably effective. Okay? Once I pray my feet, now I've got bumpers here. No matter which way he rolls, there's a bumper there. There's a bumper there. Bump, bump, bump. So when he lifts, cross your feet. No problem once we get here. Okay? We start climbing high. Now, I give myself the ability to start working on that elbow from super high. Not to mention, when you cross your feet in the small of somebody's back, it sucks. He no longer has the desire to drive hard and let his back slam back down to the mat. Why? Because your heels are in the small of his back. It doesn't feel good. So now, they're going to just do a mock kind of lift. We're going to block. And then I want you to cross your feet as best as possible. You don't necessarily have to cross them toes out. You can cross them toes in. Look how high I am. Okay? If you can't cross them, just scoot up tight. All right? Got it? Let's work on the climb up. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Climbing up. I see some of y'all getting rolled over. Okay? That's normal. Understand that when you climb up high and everything gets a little bit tighter, it might actually be a little bit easier for them to try to roll you over than it would be if you were down lower. Here's the thing to keep in mind. If their elbows are super tight and they have something to frame off of, the second that he lifts, I'm going to turn my toes into his feet or into his hips. And whichever way it looks like he's going to go, I'm just going to reach out far and block. And my hands have to go out. And I have to negate that and counter that at the second that he starts to roll. Okay. So another little secret that I like to do, and what we have to understand is why this works. Why does the scorpion on one side work to stop the hip lifting, the hip elevation? Well, because if he turns, his legs operate in halves. So initially, let's say he wants to go this way. The majority of his drive is going to come off of this leg to lift his hips. So once he starts to lift off that side, he's got it going. And then if he's trying to roll me all the way over, it transfers all the power from the left leg to the right. So he goes from left drive to now he's pushing off the right side. Okay? Primary, secondary becomes primary halfway through that movement. I'm going to kill the secondary. He gets the 50, but he never gets to translate or transition his power from here to here because I'm killing it with that scorpion kick. So as soon as I get to here, he can have that 50, but he can't take the rest of it to make the 100 because I'm straightening that leg out. So he's constantly trying to drive off of it, and I'm constantly pulling it backwards for him. Okay? So final thing that I like to do here, offsetting of the head, and then I cross the feet underneath. Why do I do this? If I get to a point where he's really, really trying to move and I feel like I can drive my hips into him and flatten him out and keep him there, this is where some flexibility kind of comes into it, and it's mostly ankle and hip. So I'm going to flatten out. I'm going to cross my feet under his bend of his knees, okay? And I'm going to take my knees off of the mat. I'm not going to leave my knees down on the mat. Because when my knees are down on the mat, it takes most of my weight off of him, okay? When I cross the feet and I pull my knees up, I kind of scorpion both, it drives my hips down into his diaphragm. Makes it really hard for him to breathe, and it makes it hard for him to drive because now I'm effectively doing the scorpion with both legs, but I'm killing all of his hip drive. Okay? So you're going to notice some of you may be flexible enough to hit that, some of you may not. If you can't cross your feet and flatten your hips out, have him try to lift, and you counter the lift with your own hips. He'll tell you it is not easy to lift his hips up right now. Okay, not easy at all. All right. The other thing that I do here is I'm going to come under the head, and I'm going to turn his chin one way, offsetting my body, and I'm going to flatten my hips out. Now I've got those bumpers I was telling you about. He cannot go to his left because his head is turned to his right. So from here, I have really, really effective control. If you have not experimented with this and used it, you need to try. Okay? Hand underneath, shoulder turns the head, feet cross up underneath, knees come off the mat, got my bumpers here, and I've got kind of this one outside post floating around out here on the backside. Okay? So where does the flexibility of it come in? You may notice a lot of guys in jiu-jitsu class sit like I sit. All right? It's not the most comfortable way to sit, okay? Get used to trying to sit like this. There's a reason why. Because when you sit on your feet, essentially what you're doing is your body weight is folding your feet inboard. Okay? Stretching out your ankles, stretching out all the ligaments and tendons in your leg, lower legs and your shin and your tops of your feet. And that's where a lot of that flexibility comes from. So if you have a hard time crossing your feet and sitting on your feet and putting all your weight on it, you probably don't have the flexibility that you need to have. Okay? Get used to, when we're drilling or you're watching technique, sit on your feet. All right? You watch most classes, online classes, you go to a seminar, you go to another school, a lot of people will be sitting this way. It's not because it's some weird known form of meditation, it's because they realize the flexibility in their feet is something that they need, and it helps to work that. Okay? Some academies require you to sit like this. It's their sort of sit at attention. There are places out there that would consider it an insult to be sitting laid back or to be sitting cross-leg. I don't even think you can say Indian style anymore. That's supposedly like not a good thing. Jeez, whatever. Guess you can't say that no more. But one way or the other, they would consider it sort of a disrespect to sit any way other than this right here, which is considered your seated at attention position. Well, it is good for you. It does many things for you. Okay? So remember, we're not going to get to the high elbow portion yet. We'll probably work on that tomorrow or next week. Working on maintaining the mount, and remember that as you do this, they start to buck. Elbow goes skyward. Okay, I'll let you kind of ad-lib the high elbow position for now, and then work on that on your own, and then we'll cover into it probably early next week. All right, Matt is yours. 1, 2, 3.